Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm now joined by Alex Stewart.
Hi, Joe.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
Yeah.
Pretty decent day of the footy, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yep, there we go. Also here is Seb Stafford-Bloor. Hello.
Hello, Joe. Great to be back.
Yeah, fantastic to be back, isn't it?
Yeah, I've missed it.
I kind of missed it for 2 days.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with myself this time of night.
It's lovely being the centre of attention, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yeah.
Sure is, yeah.
Anyway, lots to talk about today. 2 games. We're going to begin with Italy and Austria, and we're going to end on Denmark-Wales. Very exciting. A few little other non-Euros related points in here to discuss too. But if you like Euros related points and non-Euros related points, then you'll find no better place to enjoy both of those things than The Athletic. If you visit theathletic.com/Tifo, you'll find that for the time being, for a limited time only, you can actually get The Athletic for £1 per month for 6 whole months. That's the price of 1 pint in an expensive London pub.
What a deal that
for
is.
6 months you can do that. So if you're interested, visit theathletic.com/Tifo and just have a browse of the unbelievable work on offer, because there really is a lot of it. There we go. Anyway, it's been a fun day of football. It's a shame, of course, to see Wales go out. I lived in Wales for many years, so I've got a soft spot for them and feel a bit bad for them losing 4-0 to Denmark, but we will talk about that a little bit later. We are, however, going to kick things off by discussing Italy and Austria. Also very exciting. We'll talk a bit later about what some of the quarterfinals look like, because hot diggity dog, there's some big games. I feel like the draw is very heavily stacked on one side.
Feels like the game's getting pretty big pretty quickly,
Yeah.
which is a little bit strange,
It's
but I'm not quite
exciting.
ready for it, but it is exciting.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about all of these things and more after I leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of Seb Stafford-Bloor and Alex Stewart. Right, let's begin with... Do I need to start that again?
Sorry.
That's all right. Right, let's begin with Italy now, because it took 120 minutes there, Seb, to get there. I mean, expectations, of course, were for Italy, to walk off with it a bit. They didn't. It took 100 minutes for the first goal to come. There were 2 more goals after that. Federico Chiesa with the opener, which was a lovely shot. We'll come to talk about that a bit later. But it's fair to say today that they weren't quite firing on all cylinders, or at least they needed that extra half an hour to make it look like an Italy result.
Yeah, it's very strange because after about half an hour, we were happily talking amongst ourselves and just kind of expecting Italy to eventually get the goal they needed. And no, they weren't creating really gilt-edged chances, but at the same time, there felt like there was a growing pressure that would eventually tell. And then I remember looking up and it was about 70, 75 minutes and there was no goal, and Austria had their chances. Arnautovic had a goal ruled out for offside, correctly ruled out for offside.
Lovely goal, though.
It felt like, you said this on the opening night, so we watched Italy against Turkey and everyone got carried away, including me, and said, oh, they were great. That was really, really fun to watch. They were aggressive and attacking and offensive.
Which
Brilliant.
they were.
But they need an awful lot of ball to create good chances. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really force any saves. They ended up scoring 3 goals, and that was very, very impressive. Well done. But at the same time, that felt like it came to pass tonight, because a lot of ball, a lot of possession in areas where they might be dangerous, where against teams like Turkey, they were playing that kind of cut pass into the penalty box, and you had runners going. Typically, Spinazzola, actually, on the left-hand side, was very effective in that role. And tonight, those balls either weren't finding the right men, they weren't quite at the right angle or pace, or a defender was cutting them out. So good job, Austria. Italy, I don't know, I'm scaling back my enthusiasm for them from like a 5 to a 4, I think, after that, just because...
That's a 5 out of 5.
Well, I think, I mainly because it worried me that when it didn't go well, when they lost the momentum, they didn't seem able to get it back. Yep, they won the game.
They actually slowed towards the end of 90 minutes.
Very much so. And actually, when you're able to bring a player like Federico Chiesa onto the pitch, with Bellotti, by the way, not, perhaps not an elite player, but a very, very good Serie A player. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of jolt that you can use to win a game. But without those resources, I don't know whether Italy get through that, or whether they get out of it without having to go through penalties first. And it was, Yeah, a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, okay. It was interesting to watch. I mean, you mentioned Spinazzola already.
Yeah.
We saw him a couple of times in the first half get into those positions we've seen in the group stages. Very exciting. They stopped doing that really in the second half, Alex. And in fact, during the whole group stages, they scored 7 goals. So I wondered this evening whether this was an issue with the quality of opposition, whether Austria have perhaps had time to watch all of Italy's group games and work out how to stop those sort of incisive box runs. I mean, was it something that Austria did, or was it Italy just not being at their best today? How do you stop them from scoring?
I think it's a combination of the two. So we talked when the team sheet came out and Conrad Lima was on the right-hand side in that apparently advanced position, but not quite. That was, to me, seemed like a very good tactical decision from Foda to have a very energetic pressing midfielder to double up and assist defending against Spinazzola's runs, which have been so effective for Italy on the left-hand side. Yeah. You could see there was a moment where we were sort of looking at the Austrian backline and trying to work out if it was a 5 or a 4, and that was because in most instances when Austria formed a low block, they were very deliberately doubling up with the wide attacker and the fullback. So at times they almost looked like a slightly bold 6 at the back. And again, this was to prevent Italy from cutting inside, because when you double up on the wide attackers, you can sort of do that at a slightly staggered diagonal so that they're not just kept against the touchline, but they find it much, much harder to turn inside. Yeah. So Italy's shot map in this game, apart from the 2 shots that resulted in goals, which were inside the 6-yard box, very, very centrally clustered and from range. Yeah. And Italy this tournament have been very, very shot productive. So they've been getting over 20 shots a game. This was 27. But if you can hold them back and you can keep those shots being from the edge of the box or slightly wide, even if it's just inside the box, obviously you massively reduce the danger that those shots pose. And that was something that Austria did do very effectively. However, as Seb says, also Italy failed to react. Mm-hmm. So with this doubling up on Austria's right-hand side, Italy's left, you would expect them to adjust and try to attack the right-hand side more. Now, granted, that Chiesa goal came from the fact that everyone was so grouped over on Italy's left that the switch pass was on. Yeah. And if you can affect switch passes quickly, that's really effective. They weren't doing that to start with, nor were they really pushing Di Lorenzo forward on the right-hand side. They weren't getting quite the same thrust from Berardi cutting inside because of that doubling up. Yeah. So it's a combination, really.
Well, I was going to say, actually, it's not really that much of a surprise, the goal in the end, was it? Because it felt like Italy had been pressing a little bit in extra time. But also, as Alex says, Berardi cuts inside quite a lot. And so the switch pass wasn't really on for that reason. As soon as Chiesa came on, he changed the game, and his goal came from outside, right?
Yeah, I also feel like Chiesa's a little less predictable. Berardi, I
don't think anyone could have predicted the way he scored the goal.
No,
right?
Well, absolutely not. I just mean in terms of his movement.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. Just because
you're so not used to that.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to it properly. Defensive. I didn't even listen to you. I just retaliated. Berardi will always come inside. Chiesa, I saw someone on the chat earlier saying, why isn't Chiesa starting for Italy? I don't know. I really like him as a player, but then I probably haven't seen him as much as I need to make that judgment. But yeah,
I think I said to you after he scored, the only other time I've seen him play was when he scored 2 for Juventus against Porto.
Yeah,
so obviously in my mind, he's great. Why isn't he playing?
Yeah, and one of those was a really terrific header. I've seen a bit more of him than that because my faithful DAZN subscription is good in Germany. Sure, but I'm not sure. Just every time I see him play, he's doing something effective. Maybe he's not winning games. He's not having as pronounced an effect as he did that night, but he looks like a problem. He looks like something that Alex said actually while we were watching him. He has a kind of ungainly style which makes him look a little bit clumsy. Actually, for young people, go and Google his father's highlights, Enrico Chiesa, because they look exactly the same on the ball. They have the same touches, technique, shooting habits. They could be the same player, but he has that sort of quality where it's not that smooth. He looks a little bit strange when he's running through, And he has that tendency to be a bit more aggressive with his movements. He's not cutting inside onto a left foot. He was going for the back post, and a little bit of a strange bit of control. He kind of kisses the football as he controls it. It's quite strange if you look at it, but great finish. And yeah, like what a luxury to bring a player like that off the bench. And also if you're a defensive unit and you spent the whole game tucking inside and making sure that cut in field isn't available, and all of a sudden 95 minutes into the game, you're asked to do the exact opposite. Like your concentration is probably going to fail you at some point. So felt really harsh in Austria actually because they played ever so well. But yeah, great goal.
Well, Alex, another thing I wanted to ask you was we looked at the lineups before the game began, and the main thing, the main noticeable thing was that Locatelli had been dropped to the bench and Verratti had come in his place. Now, that wasn't entirely unexpected. Of course, Verratti was unavailable for selection in the first game or two due to injury, and we assume he would have been the first choice otherwise. But Locatelli was a player who really impressed in the group stages, and it feels, although Verratti had a great game today, I think, it does feel that he offers something a bit different. And it, given that the result, the result was similar, but the performance was slightly different for Italy today. Did that play any part at all for you, do you think?
I think the issue that Italy have is the threat posed by those runners from midfield is considerably diminished without Locatelli. Mm-hmm. So if you look at who took shots for Italy, every Italian player, obviously excluding Donnarumma, but every Italian player had a shot except for Verratti, Jorginho and Cristante, who came on as a defensive midfielder. So that shows that there is a general willingness of this team to get forwards, except for that holding kind of pair there. Barella obviously plays a much more advanced role. Now that's fine. It doesn't really matter. But if a lot of what you're creating results in shots from that sort of area I was talking about, just outside the penalty area, what you want is a player who's really used to arriving in those positions and taking those shots, and in some instances to really good effect, like we've seen with Locatelli, both for Italy and also for Sassuolo. So I think it robs Italy of a bit of that dynamism. Granted, if you played Verratti on the left-hand side and Locatelli as the holding midfielder, that would require an adjustment in how those players get forwards. It would ask quite a bit of Verratti to hold back and tuck inside, or maybe Di Lorenzo would push up to make more of a kind of midfield role rather than acting as a sort of more orthodox attacking fullback. It is possible to do those tweaks. I guess what Mancini is looking at is that Jorginho has anchored this side thus far. He understands that role, and although Locatelli brings a lot and Verratti brings a lot, like Jorginho is the one around whom it all revolves. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's hard. Yeah. I would try playing Locatelli in that role, but we're now in the stage where a tactical mistake that can't be rectified really, really instantly, like we'll come to look at, is, that could be the difference between progressing and not. So it's very, very difficult to make those calls now.
You thought Verratti had a great game today, Seb, didn't you? What is it that he brings that is different to Locatelli?
I think we saw it in the first 20 minutes, Joe. I think it was that technical ability of his can be applied pretty much anywhere between the two penalty boxes and in both of them. But there's a spiky spitefulness to Verratti, which has obviously seen him collect a lot of yellow cards during the course of his career, but he's very aggressive without the ball too, and that's good. One of the best chances Italy had in the first half was when I think he retrieved possession right on the edge of the Austrian box. There was a sort of a loose ball which he got to first, kind of really rugged tackle, pushes it out to I think Spinazzola, and it eventually ends up being a shot /wide. But Verratti is almost perfect as a midfield player because he has every attribute that you'd want. He is great receiving the ball, great passing the ball. He is great on the ball in terms of like his technical ability. And he's also, you imagine, really nasty to play against. Can you imagine lining up, if you went to Power League, then you were playing against 5 Marco Verrattis.
Sure.
At start. That is the absolute nightmare because they're good at everything.
Yeah.
And he's that player. And I think it's funny because his career has been quite strange because I think had he played somewhere else other than PSG, had he played, for instance, for a Manchester City perhaps, or a Bayern Munich, or one of those teams that isn't whose league season occurs a little bit more in the spotlight, I think Marco Verratti has a just a much bigger reputation than he does. He's a super player.
Can I say, like, building on your Power League analogy, Marco Verratti is the sort of player that I would be afraid of to play in a Power League scenario. Not only just because he's
I'd be biting your ankles and
well, this is the
snapping
thing.
into tackles.
As a tall and large man,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of many other footballers.
He would be your nightmare.
I feel like I could push the people around, and I'm sure I'd be rubbish and they'd take the ball from me, but I wouldn't hurt. I feel like Marco Verratti is made of stone, and if I fell on top of him, he'd kind of just go through my entire body. Do you know what I mean? He wouldn't move at all.
Yeah,
and I'd sort of wrap around him like jelly.
He's kind of like a sort of a Roberto Duran of the Power League, basically.
Sure.
And also, like, there's an attitude that goes with him, which is kind of funny because he has the face of a choir boy, doesn't he? He looks sort of innocent and butter wouldn't melt, but he's nasty in a good way. I like a nasty midfielder, but he's great. It's really interesting because that Locatelli debate, that's going to come back, I think, at some point, because I think Alex is right. I think having that runner from midfield and served Italy so well through the first 2 games, and you wonder if they do come up against a team like Belgium, I think I want probably that extra man making late runs into the box. I want that Belgian midfield to be thinking about what they have to do without the ball as well. I think that could be a benefit.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if the answer to that is actually to play a Locatelli, Jorginho, Verratti midfield 3.
Get rid of
Barella, push Verratti up almost into the 10 slot, potentially.
Interesting.
That kind of
How
position.
unusual.
Yeah.
I don't know if
not
he's
that
done
unusual,
that
is it?
before.
Quite
Though? I
unusual.
think that's the thing.
He's done it
It's
before.
pretty
Yeah, he's done it a few times
yeah,
before.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah, a few times.
Maybe you've done a few times, but I wouldn't consider him to be anything more than a number 8. I think he could play as a number 10 or as a holding midfielder. Marco Verratti very much.
It would be embarrassing though if someone said that he'd never played there.
Theoretically, that would be embarrassing if that were to have happened.
Yeah,
I do want to draw back against Belgium, for example, where having that, yes, Barella's energy and his bursts into the right half space are effective, and particularly because Belgium have this tendency to push their left wing back really, really high in the press. Sneaking into that space in behind there, I think, would work quite well. But also, they're going to need to control the ball against Belgium, and they're going to need to have compactness in that midfield, because Belgium will either keep the ball really well through Tielemans and De Bruyne, or they'll be able to launch through passes to Lukaku, who can run on and score. And so you need to stop that being an option.
Would you worry about your creativity without Barella? Because I don't know if this is just based on what we saw tonight, but to me, Italy feel like they need to find the perfect ball.
Yeah,
and Barella is clearly like a strength in that area.
You would sacrifice creativity for defensive strength, but as Grace Robertson did in her little email out today, it's the short towel thing. Or blanket, sorry, yes. So
this is the duvet thing,
right? So you cover your head, or you cover your
short towel.
But you get cold
duvet.
one way or another.
You get cold one way or another.
You got confused between a short towel and a duvet.
Well, it's
short towel.
What,
gets
are you
you
sleeping
in the
under
actual
at
analogy.
home?
I think
when you get home and you go to bed, are you pulling a little short towel over yourself to cover yourself from the night? Tell me about the short towel analogy.
I'm not going to discuss my sleeping.
No, go on. Tell me about the
you.
short towel analogy.
So the idea basically is that if you have attacking potential, you sacrifice defense. If you privilege defense, you sacrifice attack. And the point that Grace was making, which was really astute, is that in club football, because you can buy players in, you can basically lengthen the duvet anyway, so that the or towel or blanket or whatever it is we're talking about
becomes a bath towel.
Sure,
a bath
something
sheet.
Great like that.
Yeah.
One of those really long ones you steal from hotels.
Bath sheets.
Whereas in international football, you can't, because the pool is that much smaller.
Yeah.
And once you're in a tournament, you're then making these decisions based on an already small pool, because it's only maximum 26 players.
Sure.
I think against Belgium, that's a trade-off worth having, because I think there's enough weakness in Belgium's defensive line that one of those 27 shots will get in, or Chiesa will burst through. Whereas the danger for me is allowing Belgium time and space in midfield.
I would very, very, very much be lining Chiesa up against Vertonghen.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That is a serious weakness and potentially a massive mismatch.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see whether he gets called in. I feel like playing Verratti against Vertonghen kind of favours him because it doesn't ask quite as many questions of his age and his pace, because his legs are on the way, and I'm not going to say have gone, but he's not the player he was. If you get Chiesa on the outside, or if you have a player on the ball with Chiesa making a run over the top, that's going to be difficult for Belgium to deal with, I think.
I think Belgium will find it hardest if Italy are direct.
We should say it could be Portugal.
Portugal.
For anyone
totally.
any viewers or listeners that are confused listening to us now, we are hypothesizing that Italy could face Belgium in the next round because they will face the winner of Belgium-Portugal, and so this is just sort of one of the outcomes. A quick thing to insert here before it becomes irrelevant. Top tip for listeners. If you're looking for a large towel, you do need to search for bath sheet. Now, that's something that I found before my mother told me about this. I kept trying to buy large towels, and every time the towel arrived, it really wasn't that big, until I started searching for bath sheets, because they really are large towels, and it's strange that they're called that. But if you're looking for a large towel and you've not been able to get over that hurdle yet, bath sheets.
That was a top tip.
It was a top. You know what? It changed my life. That
Yeah.
Now I've got 2 bath sheets and I'm happy as Larry.
Yeah.
What if it's Portugal, Alex?
Then it's easier for Italy.
Okay, I disagree with that actually.
I feel like I've been tricked by Portugal because I think the temptation is to believe, they're not all that. They've disappointed us. Their midfield is a little bit of a shambles. They can't work out how to kind of how to sort of properly link the attacking midfield with defensive midfield. But if they learn the lessons from the group stage and Renato Sanchez plays, I'd be interested to see what happens there.
I think the issue, certainly what I detect from Portuguese fans, is that he doesn't really learn the lessons. And I, yes, if they do line up with Moutinho and Renato Sanchez flanking Danilo, that's the three definitely more of a challenge for Italy. I still think that there are enough. I mean, so in the Portugal-France game, the number of times Portugal's back four was caught very, very square and having to turn onto these balls that Pogba was playing through, which is why Pogba excelled in that game. And the Portuguese midfield wasn't giving him the space and the pressure to stop him doing that. So he was able to pick that pass and then play it against a back four who were stood kind of square on and firm, and then went, oh gosh, have to turn around now. I can see
Mbappe. Oh.
Right. Now if you're allowing Jorginho or Verratti the time to pick those passes, then it doesn't matter if you need 27 shots. Like, one of those through balls is going to work, or there's going to be a ball out to Spinazzola who will turn Nelson Semedo inside out, and it'll be fine. If you're Italian.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I just, I think we just feel like we've been waiting all tournament to see how talented Portugal are and what that talent can look like in concert. So I don't know. I'm not ready to write them off just yet, but let's go
back to the quality of opposition though, because Italy, as discussed, have faced Turkey, who we found out were rubbish.
Chaos,
Wales, who we've seen today, and we'll come to discuss that shortly, let in a lot of goals. Switzerland, who are a decent enough team, but obviously beatable, we should say. But Belgium or Portugal is a very, very different challenge to any that has faced Italy so far. And as a casual viewer, I watched today's game, and I think they need more than 90 minutes to break down Austria. Now, that's no mean feat. Austria are a difficult team to break down. They have lots and lots of good players. But I also feel that Austria offered a threat in this game, right? And with a better team, with better attackers, I feel like Italy are conceding more than one goal in this sort of game, with this kind of performance today. Now, whether they can score goals or not against Portugal or Belgium is sort of besides the point. I feel like they create so many chances that they're going to score goals in whichever game that they lose if they don't end up winning the entire tournament. The question really is, how well will their defence stand up to scrutiny when it's actually challenged? Because I feel like we haven't really seen that yet. Maybe that's not fair, but...
No, I don't think it's unfair, because I don't think it's necessarily an issue of individual defenders and individual defensive quality. I think it might be a question of balance. So we've talked all tournament about how aggressive Spinazzola is down the left. De Lorenzo is not quite as aggressive, but performs a similar function. And you're right, there were chances this evening which, if they'd fallen into the hands of a better forward or a better side,
or Cristiano Ronaldo,
or Romelu Lukaku, it's a completely different issue. What I'd say is that I don't expect it to be much tougher in the attacking sense for Italy, just because I thought Austria's defensive networks were really, really good. I thought the right side, I've become a big Stefan Leiner fan over the last 6 months. He's been he's at Gladbach at the moment. I thought Konrad Laimer was very good ahead of him tonight, as he was last week on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Savoy and Alex Stewart favourite was pretty good in defensive midfield. And the kind of the Dragovic Hinterraga defensive unit was good as well. So it's not like, I wonder whether, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that we're going to have a situation where Italy is suddenly going to find themselves facing a different quality of defence. I just think it's a question of how much they commit forward.
Yeah.
And I don't really have a problem with the balance in the midfield. I think the centre back partnership is pretty good. I don't know about whether Chiellini's coming back into it. I know we're going to talk a little bit about Donnarumma, the goalkeeper, who I thought made a couple of really good saves and did very little else, which is kind of like a classic. So I don't know. It's
quite exciting though, isn't it?
It feels tonight. There were times tonight when I thought this is kind of what happens when a team gets used to winning, and when a team develops that as a habit, and when someone comes along who interrupts it, then there's a little bit of what's happening here? It's like if a boxer gets used to just knocking people out in the second round again and again and again, and then they throw their best punch, someone gets knocked down, but then they get up again.
And then it's round
three. They don't really know what to do after that. And I felt Italy had I don't know what you call that condition, but a little bit of anxiety maybe, I don't know. So we'll see. But balance and those fullbacks as well, that's the key, I think, in playing at Belgium or Portugal, because both have a lot of pace on the counter-attack theoretically. Yeah. And that could be we saw like in one of Turkey's good moments, which feels like a very long time ago now, they had a few breaking opportunities in the first half of that first game where you thought, ooh, Italy look a bit vulnerable there. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen that weakness examined ever again, really. So it'd be interesting to see what
I want to examine it.
You do?
Yeah.
Get the spotlights on, see where it is.
Well, I think the exciting thing is that whoever it is, Portugal or Belgium, it will be examined in the next game. So that's going to be fun. We will be back just after this short break. What did you open your mouth for?
Well, I was going to imitate what you do during the breaks. Be like, oh, this is a break, this is a break, this is a break, this is a break. Now we're back. And
when does a hand towel become a flannel?
No, I think a hand towel and a flannel are the same thing. No, they're not, are they?
No, a flannel's for washing.
A hand towel, a flannel.
I assume it's to do with the type of material. Do you own a flannel? No.
Do you own a flannel? Do you own a sponge?
No, I just wash my face with my hands.
My wife has sponges.
Like a raccoon.
Like a raccoon.
Yeah, sponges. You know, I heard once that the bacteria on a sponge outnumbers the bacteria on a toilet seat.
Depends. You've got to wring it out.
Surely that depends on the size of both of those
Also,
items.
what you're using the sponge for.
Per bit.
Per bit?
Yeah, per bit.
Okay. You bring the science.
Seriously, though, the bath sheet thing. Do check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. And before we move on to talk about Denmark and Wales, I wanted to bring up Donnarumma into this conversation, Alex, because he is moving to PSG for the new season, and I thought we'd just take an opportunity to once again say, poor old Keylor Navas, Tifo's favourite goalkeeper.
What does a man have to do to be taken seriously?
Seriously, though, what does he have to do?
Oh, I wasn't asking about him. Anyway. I just tried one of yours.
I know. Yeah. I was doing you. No, I was helping you. I was giving you the space.
No, because it's
I was playing into it. I was giving the space. I looked over there, confused. The whole point is,
you know, confused face.
You let it lie. You let it lie.
I know, but I panicked.
But yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So trying to be funny is very new to you. So let's just move on. But we'll come back to that. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's weird because Navas. We were talking about this before that Navas hasn't won the European Cup because he's an okay goalkeeper playing behind a really good team.
Yeah.
Like, he has excelled consistently for whichever team he's played for. And it just feels like, for some reason, I don't know whether this was a trend that was established when Buffon moved to Juventus for that astronomical fee, and suddenly people started buying big-name goalkeepers for big money, whereas previously it had never been a position where that was a thing. That top clubs like PSG feel they need to attract that sort of player, where Keylor Navas statistically last season was one of the outstanding goalkeepers in Europe's top 5 leagues. If you look at post-shot expected goals, plus or minus, he basically concedes fewer than he should based on the quality of the shots he faced. It's really hard to remember any massive Keylor Navas mistakes. There was one, I think, in the most recent Champions League campaign where he misjudged something, but it really sticks out because he doesn't do it very often. And I just don't know why he kind of gets, like, not overlooked. Yes, overlooked. Yes, he does.
Overlooked overlord.
When people have conversations about the top goalkeepers in European football, his name is never in that conversation.
It's status. It's status. So if you have your kind of your Mount Rushmore of European football's goalkeepers, he's not on it. It's completely unjust, but you don't associate Keylor Navas with a thing. So, for instance, Manuel Neuer, you think of playing a kind of sweeping role, being good with his feet, being having all of that confidence. David De Gea, or the sort of the previous incarnation of David De Gea, is his identity is reflexes and shot stopping. So for Navas, it feels like most people only see him, and I think this is kind of the Verratti problem lately. People don't realise how good he has been at PSG. They've got less excuse for the Real Madrid thing because I don't know, like, how much more in the spotlight you can get than winning 3 European Cups. But it does feel like that. It doesn't feel like this is a consequence of a proper reflection on what his abilities are, because
maybe he's heading to Spurs.
Oh, don't.
I've heard him linked with the.
Don't do it, Keylor.
I've heard him linked with the manager's job.
Yeah, maybe.
Thanks for trampling all over my joke.
No, okay. That was.
I was trying to line it up, but you just rushed in like a
I
rhinoceros.
don't have a sense of humour about this at the moment. We know this. You've been prodding me about this all day, and I will not.
I've resisted that joke about 3 times already this evening. Yeah. It's disappointing though, isn't it? Do you think his height has anything to do with it? Because he's a little shorter than the average goalkeeper.
Yeah, I don't know. I think those assumptions about how tall a goalkeeper has to be probably died a little bit with people like Buffon, who are by no means sure he's a tall guy, but he's not 6'7". That's what I'm trying to say. And not every goalkeeper has to look like Thibaut Courtois. Agility is important, handling is important, being good with your feet is really important.
Yeah.
So the position and the requirements of it have changed. I don't know. I just think he is destined to be undervalued and underappreciated. In 20 years' time, someone will tell you that a guy called Keylor Navas was won 3 European Cups and all manner of other trophies across the continent. And people go, oh, yeah, he was really good.
Yeah.
So...
Well, let's make sure that Keylor Navas knows that we here at Tifo, we admire you.
Liam in the chat says Jan Sommer is a short goalkeeper, but he's good. Yeah, excellent point. He's like, I think he's not quite the ideal of the modern goalkeeper, but he's a really good example of someone who, had he been playing 20 years ago, some youth coach would have said, no, you're too small, go away. Now, like, you can kind of, as long as a goalkeeper can be probably above about 5'11", 6 foot, up to about 6'4" is a good height, I guess. You just don't have to be 7 foot. You don't have to be a basketball player.
They told me I was too big.
Did they really?
No, of course not.
I got slightly obsessed with the Lens goalkeeper, who is about 5'10", and when you watch Lens play, as I'm sure you will do, he really is discernibly shorter than many of his teammates. But he plays very aggressively, and
like a cat.
Kind of. He gets right forwards, narrows the angles, leaps around, and it works for him. Like, he's a technically good goalkeeper. Navas obviously is not that short, but I kind of wonder whether what people want now in their goalkeepers at bigger clubs is somebody who is either a flashy goalkeeper. I don't mean flashy in a bad way, but someone like a Neuer or a Ter Stegen who will come out and dominate an area in front of their box, or they want somebody who is kind of talismanic and shouty. And Navas is neither of those things. He just does everything very well.
It's just great.
It's a lack of personality. Like, no, I don't mean that as a criticism. I don't mean he doesn't have a personality. I just mean he has a lack of tangible personality for people who watch the game to grasp, and therefore he kind of just fades into the background a little bit. I also wonder whether one of the problems for him was, if you think about the personalities within that Real Madrid team that won the European Cups, that's pretty difficult to have your own identity within that. If you're a goalkeeper at Real Madrid, and you're not Iker Casillas, it's tricky. Like, you got Ronaldo, you got Di Maria, you got Benzema, Kroos and Modric. It's Sergio Ramos. It's like, that's a very, very long list of very recognizable players. It's, you're just going to be do you remember in Almost Famous when they make the T-shirt and you've got guitarist who's in focus and everybody else is kind of blurred in the background? Yeah. Pretty easy to be a blurred background guy at Real Madrid, I would have thought.
Yeah.
With Lons, by the way, I'm talking about Jean-Luc Leca, not Farinas.
Okay.
No, I'm answering a point on there.
Gabriel Albo talks about Jorge Campos. Yeah, great fun, because he was tiny, but he used to design his own goalkeeping kits. And there were these sort of bright coloured, surfing like bits that he used to wear at World Cup.
Is that Jorge Campos?
Yeah, he used to
played as a striker as well.
Yeah, not in the kind of comes up for corners way. They would give him an outfield shirt and say, "Go and play up." He was really, really good footballer. Go and search for his highlights. That will be.
Speaking of goalkeepers, someone mentioned this in the chat, and it reminded me. Have either of you ever seen any of Ben Foster's YouTube videos?
Of the ones,
yes, one or two.
The cycling goalkeeper. They're great. The little backstage ones where he brings his webcam and puts it behind the goal.
Yeah, they're cool.
There was one I was watching where he was going into, I think they were playing Man United, and he was away at Old Trafford going through the little... it's very, very entertaining.
So a couple of seasons ago, Shane Long scored the fastest goal in Premier League history against Ben Foster at Watford, and I was covering that game. And after the press conferences had finished, everyone's kind of sitting in the auditorium doing, writing their post-match pieces and doing some editing. Ben Foster just barges in, and everyone's like, "Oh goodness!" And you think someone who's just conceded the fastest goal in Premier League history, a bit embarrassed, and he dances through, just shouting, "I'm a record breaker! I'm a record breaker! I'm a record breaker!" And he's I don't know him personally. I've never met him, but
he seems really fun.
Everyone who has said he's just a genuinely decent bloke who has his heart in the right place and thinks about the game in the way that you probably should. So he seems like a nice chap, and his videos are cool. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, speaking of cool, Denmark scored 4 goals against Wales, which is cool, depending on your perspective, I suppose. To other people, it's not cool at all. But to some people, it's very, very cool. Of course, they won handsomely, Seb. I'm not sure that anyone saw quite that coming. I mean, we had a couple of predictions here for Denmark victory in the office, and some half and half, I think, for Wales and half for Denmark. 4-0, though, it doesn't flatter them. They played very, very well. There's lots of interesting things to talk about from this game. But yeah, first of all, nobody saw that coming, right? Very few people.
No, I think we all expected a little bit more from Wales.
Yes.
And the other side of the coin is...
Or a little less from Denmark.
Well, yeah, because I think I tweeted this at the time, but it amazes me that Denmark have firstly suffered the thing that they went through in the first game of the tournament, but also pragmatically, they lost such an influential player from the centre of their side, and yet they're still playing really good football. They're not they're not playing around the areas that Christian Eriksen would have been in. Yeah. They are playing really neat, really well constructed technical football. It's working really well. They were far too good for Wales, and that's before you get to the obvious point, which is something terrible happened.
Sure.
Thankfully, it had a happy ending, but something terrible happened. It was a trauma that they suffered, and they're still really excellent. But Wales, other Wales are a shambles. Like, I thought, other than that first 15 minutes, I thought they didn't deal well with the Danish switch from a back 3 to a back 4. We'll probably cover that in more detail. I thought at the end, when they started to lose their discipline and they conceded those 2 late goals.
The red card.
Yeah, the red card, I don't think it was a red card. I think it was a player frustrated, and it was a bit of a stupid tackle. It was just a bit of immaturity from Harry Wilson. You see that happen, though, and you see yellow most times. So that was unusual. But
we'll come back to talk about Wales later on in this segment. But let's pick up a point that you just dropped down there about the move from a back 3 to a back 4, Alex, because for the first 10 minutes or so, it seemed very much as though Wales were on top of the game. They had 6 shots. Bale and Ramsey looked really, really dangerous. And then in the 14th minute, it took us a while to work out, we were debating what had happened. You noticed Andreas Christensen in the midfield, and he, of course, had moved from being one of the three centre-backs into that deep midfield role. Denmark shifted to a back four, and Wales, from that point, coincidentally or not, we'll find out from your answer, I suppose, faded from the game and never seemed to respond to it.
Yeah.
It was quite a stark change.
Yeah, it was stark. And it was sufficiently stark that, look, tactical tweaks happen in games all of the time, but this was an unusually significant shift after an unusually short period of time. And the fact that Wales then kind of produced nothing thereafter until a kind of brief rally at the beginning of the second half, I think you have to assume that this was the cause. And I think what was happening a lot before was that Bale was sort of strolling around the pitch, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like he
started on the right, didn't he?
He started on the right. He was dropping quite deep into the right half space, around the kind of halfway line, maybe 5-10 yards up from that. And because he wasn't really running around a lot, he wasn't getting picked up, and that meant that when the ball then came to him, he quite often had space to drive forwards.
Loads of space.
Loads and loads of space. And sometimes that would result in a shot, sometimes in a cross. But it meant that because he was picking that kind of pocket of space up, and this was partly because, as we discussed at the time, so Denmark had a double pivot midfield when they were in the 3-4-3. And what that means is that either one of the centre-backs has to push up because Wales were playing effectively a 2+1 in midfield. So in order to match them, you've either got to have a centre-back pushing forwards or a wing-back tucking inside. But the centre-back who's pushing forwards is having to push forwards quite a long way to pick up Gareth Bale. And in this instance, I think it was Vestergaard was playing on that left-hand side. Now, Vestergaard, as a Southampton fan, I appreciate what he's good at, but I also know what he's not good at, which is moving quickly and turning quickly. And so if
he's like a lorry.
Yeah, he's like an oil tanker. He just, So if he gets that wrong, and then Bale is running at him and twisting this way and that way, and the ball goes outside or inside, like Vestergaard is screwed at that point. So it makes sense to sit off and hope that somebody else is going to do something. That wasn't happening because they were trying to counter these wide attacks from the fullbacks, and it was a really simple change. And I think the point that, I think it was you who said it when we were watching the game, was that it happened so seamlessly.
Yeah.
It seemed like there wasn't a big discussion. It wasn't like someone was summoned over to the touchline.
You didn't notice the instructions or anything. No. It just happened.
And they had played. So when they started the game against Finland, they lined up in a 4-3-3. Most of their games in qualifying had been a 4-3-3, and I think probably what they figured was, because Wales have used two systems as well in this tournament, so they probably will have gone into that game not being sure if Wales were going to play the back five like they did against Italy, with Ampadu then stepping forwards into the DM role and build up, which obviously Ampadu can't do because he's suspended, but or whether they would play a back four like they had done in other games. So I think it was a switch that was almost certainly lined up.
Yeah.
You know, if this is what's happening, if they're looking good in the game, if they've started with a back four, this is what we'll do. And Christensen is very much a centre-back who can play as a defensive midfielder. He's good in possession. There was one brief moment where he controlled the ball, spun and carried it through a couple of players. Seb was surprised that it was Christensen.
Yeah.
I was surprised also. But he's that kind of centre-back rather than a Yannick Vestergaard, who is more of a kind of stroll forwards with the ball, but not somebody to take it in tighter areas. So it worked really well for them.
I mean, you picked it up straight away, but it's fair to say that it threw us for 5 minutes because the impact was so immediate and so vast that I was watching it thinking like, something else must have happened.
Yeah.
Because I asked you about, you said, he's just moved from there to there.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only thing that's happened.
The thing is, it is unusual to see not only to see a tactical change that distinct, but also to see one that effective.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the only time that you'll see something really change a game like that is if a player is suddenly ordered to man mark another player. But what's really interesting about what Denmark did is that nobody man-marked Bale. or man-marked Ramsey.
Yeah, yeah.
So the player that was taking Bale was changing. And in fact, one of the things that Christensen stepping up into that midfield role meant was that Delaney could drop back and take Bale sometimes. Christensen could push up and take Bale sometimes. So it wasn't like they went, oh gosh, Bale's controlling the game, let's stick a lumpy centre-back on him and try and cancel him out. It was, I think that's why it was harder to kind of appreciate.
Yeah.
Because it was such a big shift, but from such a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen very often.
Even the smallest beings can change the course of history, or so said the elfin witch in Lord of the Rings. Remember? Old Kate Blanchett, yeah? Do you remember? Yeah?
Yeah, she says it to Frodo, doesn't is it Frodo?
Yeah.
Yeah. I get confused between the Bagginses.
Someone else with blonde hair is Kasper Dolberg.
That was seamless.
Thanks. Who had a great game. Actually, a really, really good game, Seb. He scored a lovely goal. He seemed very aggressive and very up for it from the beginning. Tell me about that and him.
Nice to see, because it seemed as if, obviously, everyone was aware of Dolberg from quite a young age. And when he came through, I think his breakout moment was probably when Ajax had that run to the Europa League final when they lost to Manchester United. Everyone this is a future top tier centre forward, someone that's going to occupy a very prominent place in the game. Didn't really happen, and it felt as if he lost his way a little bit. I mean, previously people were kind of connecting him with moves to Barcelona, Real Madrid, and major English clubs.
Where is he now?
Nice.
Nice.
Which is by no means a bad club or a bad move.
Sure.
It's just not quite. It reminded me a little bit of what happened to Rafa van der Vaart when he left Ajax.
Yeah.
Everyone thought, right, well, you will go straight to Ajax or Manchester United, Real Madrid or Manchester United, and he did eventually get to Real Madrid, but he went to Hamburg first.
Sure.
Which was a little bit different. Dolberg, I've always thought like really nice, delicate skill for someone that's big, which is a nice way of saying good feet for a big man, I guess.
Yeah.
But he generally does, and there's a craft to his goal scoring which I've always loved, and I think which we all saw in that first goal, which is a nice move and a very pure hit, but it's also one of those where he's used the defence and the goalkeeper's position against them. And there aren't very many very many centre forwards who score goals in his artistic ways. And if you go through his back catalogue, you see this time and again. There's a sort of a delicacy and a craft, I guess is the best way of describing it. It's really nice to see him do something good on a big stage again.
I mean, he ran riot today in this game. Like, it felt like Wales couldn't deal with him at all. Every time there was a second ball, it seemed to fall to him, stick to him, and he was. I know what you mean about the kind of big man, good feet thing, because he, as well as controlling the ball beautifully and working it through and lots of lovely little touches, he just looks so strong as well. Yeah. Like they couldn't get near him.
It's that perfect mixture. And actually, beyond the goals, there was this moment in the first half where he broke down the left-hand side of the Welsh penalty box, beat about 3 players and got to the byline. And I think it ended up with, I want to say, Braithwaite having a shot saved by Danny Ward at the near post. That kind of one where you say with his feet. I think that was right. Might have been a different player, but it was created by Dolberg, and this is the player that people were waiting to see. Is like this all-round forward who does the goal-scoring parts of the position, but is also a problem in all kinds of areas, not just in the 6-yard box or in the penalty box, but outside of it too. And he's someone that can create shot-taking actions for other players and chances for sort of fullbacks breaking down the outside and overlapping. It's really interesting to see, and I guess it comes down to a player with confidence versus one that perhaps had his self-belief a little bit knocked.
Sure.
I'm still not quite sure why. I don't know what happened to Kasper Dolberg to kind of change that trajectory. But
life happens.
Yeah, life happens. But it seems like life is happening in a happy way now.
Sure.
Well done, Kasper Dolberg.
Well done, Seb. That's a great way of rounding that sentence up.
Life is happening in a happy way.
In a happy way.
It is 11:30, isn't it?
No excuses. You've had 2 days off. Joachim Mæhle as well, Alex, was another exciting player to watch today. Tell me a little bit about him.
So he first popped up for me when he was at Genk and was an extremely aggressive attacking right back when he was there. Since moving to Atalanta, And I think he was linked with some Premier League clubs, but he moved to Atalanta. He's taken up the wing-back role. He has played on the right and also on the left. Obviously, left is where he was today. And there is a good article, I'm trying to remember who it's by. I want to say Michael Cox on The Athletic, looking at why some teams are deploying right-sided fullbacks in the left slot.
It might have been Tom Warville. It was one
Could
of
have
them.
been, yeah, it was, yeah.
Maybe even Mark Carey. Who knows?
I mean,
there's many quality writers on The Athletic.
/morph into, yeah.
Sure.
But he is just a very, very dynamic, very aggressive fullback. He's not afraid to take shots, plenty of shots, in fact, which really suits Atalanta's style. And, you know, he sort of moved there, I think, as a development project, because at the time Castagnier was there as well. And I don't know if he's playing constantly there, but, you know, they have very good options in that position. But he's just very modern in the sense that he wants to be aggressive, he wants to attack, he wants to provide that overlap, which really suits Atalanta's system. But he can also defend. And when he played in a more regular flat back four in Ghent, he was very, very good at that too. So he's the sort of player that clubs should be looking at.
Well, I was going to say, lots of people were asking us to talk about him in the chat, and a few people asking, where's next for Mela?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because Atalanta is the kind of team where they play very, very good football, but they play quite unorthodox football in terms of, you know, stylistically. There aren't many teams that are like what they're doing. And so you have to wonder the degree to which those players can adapt. But then we have seen a right wing back come from Atalanta to the Premier League and excel in his first season in Castagnier at Leicester. So somewhere that wants either a super aggressive right back or a right wing back, but one who is part of forming this kind of like 5-2-3 system where the width is maintained by those players and then other ones cut inside. He would be really, really good there.
So Chelsea, if they didn't have Reece James.
I was thinking more Arsenal. Because that's what, you know, that kind of getting forwards and pushing up into that slot where because we recorded the Ben White video earlier, which I don't know if I can mention or not, but
yeah, why not?
Sure. You know, looking at the way that Arteta has tried to build up and that slot being a bit of a weakness for Arsenal consistently, that's not a bad shout in my opinion.
Do you like it, Seb?
Sort of. The Arsenal thing I can't quite warm to, but it would make sense. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, fine.
That's as
good as you're going to get from me.
I'll get from Seb on an Arsenal matter, yeah.
We'll be back in just a moment.
This is a break, another break, a break while we rest our voices. And now we're back.
This is all stuff I have to cut out later. You know that, don't you? I'm going to be sitting there listening to your voice and seething and going, oh, that bald man's done it again. He's done it again.
He's been funny once more.
He's too funny.
He's just too funny.
Yeah. Of course, I'll be saying it between laughs, obviously. Okay, we're back. I want to talk about Wales now, Alex, because what happened with Wales? It's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You weren't ready to start again, were you? You're typing.
I was just telling the group what my football shirt and energy drink were.
Oh, right.
Because for some reason they're interested.
Sure.
What happened to Wales? I mean, they didn't react is the main thing. And what disappointed me from that perspective was that I thought the way that Wales played against Italy was incredibly smart. And it was, I think it was the last pod I was on, wasn't it? Where Rob Page instituted this weird defense / build-up system, which I hadn't seen before. Bale, Dan James, Aaron Ramsey, where they're contributing, they're doing well. There was that graphic that I showed you earlier where Dan James and Gareth Bale are in the top 15 of all players in the Euros or prior to this set of games for adding value via passing in terms of progressive passing. They seem to have a lot of things that were going right for them. And in this game, not only was there a complete inability to respond to Denmark's tactical change, which is, I think, out of character for what Rob Page had showed as a coach in the last game, which was really innovative and interesting. I thought Bale just faded out of the game. Dan James looked frustrated. And then after a while, you started to see that mixture, I think, of fatigue and frustration that starts to bubble up in players. And then you get rash challenges, you get free kicks conceded where they shouldn't have been. I think Kiefer Moore started to feel like he was never going to get a decision in his favour, and that rubbed him up the wrong way. And that's when it sort of starts to implode. And I think 4-0, I wouldn't say that it flattered Denmark in the sense that they did play very well, but it was very much a scoreline that Wales kind of inflicted on themselves at the end.
Seb, Henry Cook, Tifo Illustrator, tweeted during the game, Joe Rodon, more like Joe Nodon.
And Henry also encourages people to steal that, and use it for themselves and claim it as their own.
That's kind of what I've done.
Yeah, I don't think there was any problem with Joe Rodon. I
think it was just an opportunity for a terrible joke.
And an opportunity well taken.
Did you get a yellow card in the first 10 minutes, though?
Yeah, he was caught grappling around the halfway line and gave the referee no choice but to book him, which is a little bit rash. But it felt kind of indicative of what happened to Wales. There were a lot of bad decisions. It should be said that actually they got a little bit unlucky, I felt, with the second goal, because although clearly that was a mistake of their own making, I don't really understand why that wasn't a foul on Kiefer Moore in the build-up. That was quite strange. You could probably argue that a player of his size should probably protect the ball a bit better, maybe, but it's still a foul, I think.
Gareth Bale thought that too.
Yeah, that was a weird old interview.
I was going to ask you about the interview because this is after the game.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't see it actually, but you mentioned to me that Bale kind of left mid-question whilst being asked about his future, i.e. is this his last game? Now, on the one hand, I imagine after a loss like that in European Championships, he's probably kind of devastated about it and doesn't want to be talking about his club career.
I understand, and I say this as someone with all the admiration in the world for Gareth Bale's career. I think you can handle that a bit better, because I think, look, if you're a professional athlete and you get asked the same question again and again, I'm sure it gets really boring.
Let's play devil's advocate here, though, right?
Well,
who cares? Why does it matter?
It's not about why does it matter. It's about if you're in that position as a journalist or as a reporter or as an interviewer, the guy who's doing his job, the guy asking his question is asking the questions that if he doesn't ask, he gets shouted at by a producer.
Sure.
He's just doing his job, and I just didn't. I don't know. Like I think.
Do you feel bad for the interviewer?
No, I know, because I don't know the interviewer. I'm sure I would if I did, but I think I don't know. Like I think highly of Gareth Bale. I just felt there was a better way to do that.
Why does it change your opinion, though? You know, like, isn't it kind of fun just to walk off if you don't like a question? I mean, I wish I could do that.
If it was a question which was,
I wish you would do that.
If it was,
there he goes.
If it was a question, that was insulting or shouldn't have been asked, of course, absolutely. Yeah. I just felt that it's the obvious question, because at the end of the domestic season, Gareth Bale gave a very ambiguous answer about what his future.
Yeah.
He also said within that answer, "I'm going to talk about it after the Euro is finished."
Sure.
Now, he didn't mean 5 minutes after the Euro is finished. I understand that. I just mean that it just didn't look great. And if that's the last thing, you know, there are rumours about him potentially retiring. If that's his last action on a football pitch, it would be a shame. It's just a shame. It's just because he's been such a wonderful player, and he.
Sure.
I don't know. I didn't like it personally. It's not a big deal. It was a bit strange.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I want to go back to Denmark just before we finish now, because Denmark, of course, won the game. They were gone to face the winner of Netherlands and Czech Republic in the quarterfinals, which you have to say, not a terrible draw, is it?
No, the Netherlands, I think, have surprised us.
Sure.
And there's the two main reasons for that is that everybody knows that Frank de Boer has had a pretty disastrous managerial career apart from his stint at Ajax. And there are a lot of very talented Dutch young players who weren't selected for the squad or weren't initially getting minutes. And he's done a bit of a volte-face on Weghorst and made Weghorst really the kind of leading guy of this attack, which has worked superbly for him.
Absolutely love Weghorst.
He's also played Wijnaldum in this kind of fairly free role, playing ahead of a midfield double pivot. He's
kind of in the 10.
It is kind of in the 10. And then I did better that time.
That was good, yeah, well
thanks. And then like De Jong, Gravenberch, which was brought in for the last game, you know, there's a huge amount of encouraging signs there for the Netherlands. The Czechs are what we thought they'd be, which is obdurate, resilient, but with that dash of flair that Schick brings.
Yeah.
At the danger of Souček popping up from deep. So it's a hard one to call. I think I think the Netherlands probably are a worse draw now than anybody would have said that they were at the beginning of the tournament.
Yeah. Is it quite fun in a way to think that one of those three teams will be going to the semi-finals?
Yeah. I think it's great because I think that the Netherlands have grown into something like we hoped they might be. The Czechs are just well organised, well put together, and have a really exciting striker.
Yeah.
And Denmark, yes, there's the narrative around that, which, you know, a lot of people are emotionally invested in for reasons that I do understand. But also, as Seb pointed out, they're here on merit. They're
Great
playing really good football.
Yeah.
And so I think any one of those sides would be great. Personally, I would prefer it to be Denmark in the semi-finals because that chimes with what I said ahead of the tournament, but for no other reason than that. But I think it's great when teams who aren't a traditional powerhouse or are a traditional powerhouse but have been pretty weak of late, like the Netherlands, show that they are there and able to cope with the rigors of international football and adapt intelligently to it.
Yeah.
And play good football.
Yeah.
Because that's what you want to see good matchups, don't you?
Riggers.
Riggers?
Well, yeah, you said rigor, didn't you?
Oh, yes. No, I
To the riggers.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I mean in that perspective the mental rigors, because I think, for example, again, without being too harsh on Wales, there was definitely a mental element to Wales's defeat today.
Big time.
And particularly given what Denmark have been through, that is not there. You know, there's an extraordinary amount of resilience with the way that they've managed to cope with the tactical and technical demands of what they're doing against the backdrop of what's occurred.
Yeah.
That's hugely impressive.
Okay. Which one would you be happiest with making it to the quarters? Semis.
What, to watch or if I was Denmark?
Oh, no, I mean of those three teams that could potentially... I'm curious. I'm just curious of your thoughts.
The thing is, we spoke about this before we started recording. I've got a bit of a fear about what the semi-finals and quarterfinals is going to look like because we've got a lot of good teams meeting early. I think the Netherlands are the strongest side. I think they also have the greatest star power of those three teams. Also, I think their midfield will kind of see them through if they get through to reach Denmark, to play Denmark. Wijnaldum, De Jong, it's a good midfield, that. And I think that they can have, if they were to come up against a France or an Italy or a Portugal or a Germany, I think they can have a proper swing at them. They look, I think they're still fragile, but I think they're fun to watch at the moment. They're playing kind of an expressive form of the game. And actually, I know that he's been a little bit of a figure of fun, but it's quite a nice redemption story for Frank de Boer if they do something, because all he's really associated with at the moment as a coach is failure. And if he were to go and win the European Cup, the European Championship with his country, that's kind of a middle finger to his critics in a way. So that would be interesting.
It's great to see Daley Blind playing great football.
Sure
as well.
Sure is. Yeah.
We should say too that of the teams that they might meet in, one of those three teams reaching the semi-final, of the teams that they might be more likely to meet, one of Germany or England could be in that semi-final too. So.
Yeah,
interesting.
Also, I know a lot gets said about Germany and England, but the true rivalry in that era of Europe is Germany and the Netherlands. Real dislike there, and that would be a semi-finals. A lot of history behind that match as well. Sporting and social, and it'd be a very, very compelling contest, and hopefully played in front of a lot of people because we think capacities will have grown by then.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
Well, it's points of bad time now.
Ooh.
They really are bad today.
Point soccer.
But listeners and viewers, there's some new rules that I need to bring to your attention with points are bad. Now, Alex is shaking his head over there, as you can see, because he thinks it's complicated. It's not complicated. He just didn't read my WhatsApp message in full. It was very long. But I'll explain to you now what's changed about the rules of points are bad, moving forwards from the knockout stages all the way to the final. Two new things, okay? The first thing is that, and I feel retrospectively, if I could be bothered to work it out, this would apply and will apply for the next time we play this game. If you get a perfect score, you get minus a point, because it feels like 0 points just isn't, you want to get rid of one of the bad points. Give one bad point back. So that's a new thing. If you get a perfect score, you get minus a point, and that's lovely. Very exciting for everyone involved, okay? Here's an additional thing, though. An additional prediction that you may choose to make or not make. A gamble, you might call it, to decide whether you want to predict if the game will finish at the end of extra time or if the game will finish at the end of penalties. Now, there's a real bonus here, because if you don't have to, but if you choose to say, I think the game's going to finish at the end of extra time, and it does finish at the end of extra time, irrelevant of what your score prediction was and what the score is. See, it's not complicated at all. You would get a minus point for that. That's a positive thing. If you predict that it ends at the end of extra time and it ends at the end of 90 minutes or it ends at the end of penalties, you'd get a plus point. And you'd feel very silly because you didn't need to make that. So this rule is there for people who are lagging behind. I don't know who they might be, but someone like, I don't know, myself, for example, who's just a bit lagging behind and might need to, in every game, make a prediction about whether it's going to go to extra time or not, just to try to claw one's way back into the proceedings. So that's all. Now, here's some other things to consider. Tactics for this game, as you might, strategy, as Alex would prefer it to be called. You might want to predict 2-1 and penalties. Now, that seems like it doesn't make any sense, right? It does, because they're separate predictions, right? So you might think 2-1. That seems like a good prediction for a score. You might throw penalties on top of that. You're not saying it'll be 2-1 and then go to penalties, because that can't work like that. But you're sort of maximising, you're spreading. Yeah, you're maximising.
It's an insurance policy.
It's an insurance policy. Thanks, someone else said something. Oh.
Yeah, but insurance policy, which is also a massive gamble, which doesn't feel very insurance-y. But,
no, but who doesn't love to gamble? Yeah. I'm going to need to do a lot of that over the next. Yeah,
you're going to have to
next 3 weeks to try and get back in.
You're going to have to hedge a lot of those bets
because I'm in last place now on 89 points. See, today I made a gamble, and the gamble was that Wales would win 2-1, which obviously didn't happen. I earned 5 points there, 5 bad points on the basis of my poor prediction. I also predicted that the game would go to extra time, and it didn't. So I got an extra point because of that. 6 points from one game. Really unfortunate there. And an additional point, of course, everybody predicted that Italy would win 2-0 today. So we were almost all right. But we weren't because of Austria. But I will tell you now that JJ also had quite a bad day. He thought Wales were going to win too. So as such, JJ has now sort of dropped back to 79 points, 7 behind you, Alex, on 72. So Alex is leading the way quite firmly at the moment. It's going to take something, or even just one bad prediction,
boring. Tell them about the battle that matters.
Well, the battle that matters, Seb, is a battle which also has 7 points in it now because of my very bad day and your very good day. Yeah. I think you predicted Denmark to win 2-1.
I had Denmark 2-0.
2-0, you're right.
That late burst of goals kind of ruined it.
So you only gained 3 points today, and that's that's half of what I gained on one game.
Yes.
So you are on 82 points, and I'm on 89. I think I'm going to need to predict extra time for almost every game going forward. Just
or introduce a new rule at some point, possibly for the next round.
Maybe I will.
Some kind of 20-point bonus.
Maybe I will.
Introduced.
No, listen, I'm aware that there are some people at home listening who've adopted the points are bad game. Now, I think we had to come up with some new rules for points are bad because of the new potential game states available in the knockout stages, right? And as I said before, the perfect score thing, it really should have been in there from the beginning. It's just fair. So we would have done that for next time too. Now, is that complicated? You tell me. It's not complicated.
We should have decided this, a couple of days ago when we were last together, when we were at the Old Red Lion Theatre pub in Angel, Islington, having a really, really nice time on those comfortable sofas, watching lovely football on
This
TV.
is not an ad, but that
Not an
pub
ad, but
really
that's
is
just great.
the best pub
We
to go
should
to
have
in
talked
London.
about this rule change at the Old Red Lion.
Yeah, we
that
should
would
have
been
done.
a better venue.
Because
for
you
it.
know, when I'm at the Old Red Lion,
I feel happier.
I feel happier. I feel clear-headed.
It's a better venue for everything.
I feel creative. I
Feel
feel
relaxed,
emboldened
feel
by my
happy,
friends there. Everyone's so friendly,
And
you can see the football wherever you sit.
friendly Stan, friendly Will, friendly Uncle Damien,
Yeah.
friendly Rolo the dog.
Yeah, very friendly.
Friendly.
I hate
Everyone's
pubs,
friendly.
and
Yeah.
even I like it.
Sure, even Alex likes it, and he hates pubs. There you go.
And people, actually, don't you as well?
Yeah, they have people there too.
And you like all the people there.
Yeah.
Well, the people we've mentioned.
I mean, yeah, the ones that you've mentioned
Yeah.
specifically.
And we're
by
okay
name.
as well.
Seriously though, if you go in, do ask for Uncle Damien. He will tell you stories
Yeah.
of Essex in the 70s. Right, it's the end now of the podcast. We will be back, of course, tomorrow to discuss whatever the games are tomorrow. In fact, we're supposed to do our predictions, aren't we?
That's right.
Let me just quickly get up what those games are. Don't know where they are.
God knows.
Fixtures tomorrow. Oh, Netherlands, Czech Republic, and Belgium, Portugal. Of course. Alex, let's begin with you. Netherlands, Czech Republic, please go. Watch him predict very low scores so that he can't be beaten now. He's going to pretend he doesn't care about this game, but he does.
You're going to go for a big 5-4.
Sure.
Stop trying to convince me. I will do it. Go.
2-1 Netherlands.
Okay. Belgium, Portugal.
Belgium, Portugal. 2-1 Belgium after extra time.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Okay. So what you're saying is that if the game were to go to penalties, you would get minus a point for saying it ended at extra time.
No.
Yeah, you would. That's the
Gosh.
rules.
Yeah, no, I was being sarcastic because I sat through that
Okay.
monologue.
He understands now. I was just he didn't understand before. He was very confused for most of the day. Seb,
That's true.
Netherlands, Czech Republic.
3-1 Netherlands.
Oh.
And Belgium, Portugal, I will say 2-1 Belgium.
Okay. It's exciting, isn't it?
Sure is.
Netherlands, Czech Republic. I'm going to
8-3.
say. I'm
3-3.
going to say.
And penalties.
Stop saying things in my mind.
Golden goal.
I'm going to say that it will be 2-0 to the Netherlands. And for Belgium, Portugal, I'm going to be a bit more risky. And I'm going to say that it'll be 2-2.
Portugal on away goals.
And Portugal will win on away goals. Portugal will win on penalties.
Lovely.
There we go.
Lovely.
So that was a mistake I've made there. I'm just going to change that quickly. I'm going to say Belgium will win 3-2 and penalties. Okay? But really, I mean, Portugal are going to win on penalties. Yeah? So those are my two separate predictions now.
See, you've confused me again.
So I'm just two separate things, aren't they?
Yeah.
They both need to be true.
But but they are both true. They have one is contingent on the other.
Yeah, but I'm bargaining on being close with the...
You're manipulating reality.
Well, I'm predicting 3-2 to Belgium, but if the game were
We
to
don't
end
have
up
to go
being
through this
2-2,
I'm just
you sound
saying.
very
But it
confused.
doesn't make sense.
It's not confusing. It is the end now, though.
It's not real.
Will Hinsley in the chat says, I don't understand. Well, it's not complicated, Will.
Somebody
Bad
said
question
that
mark.
Points are bad. Shootouts
by the
are bad.
end you're just going to decide that points are in fact good and that you've won anyway.
I've been rumbled.
Which is
I've been rumbled. I've already got the song written.
Big Mad Andy says points are getting worse.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd agree
They,
with
they
you,
very
Big
much
Mad
are.
Andy.
It feels that way. It feels very, very desperate. Anyway, speaking of desperate, that's the end of the podcast now. So, Alex Stewart, thanks to you.
Thanks.
And Seb Stafford-Blore, thanking you also.
Thank you, Joe Devine.
We'll be back tomorrow to talk about all the games coverage. And as usual, thank you to our production team, our crack team of Don and Sol over there. And you can see Sol's hand there. What a lovely hand.
Great hand.
That's the end of the episode. Au revoir, goodbye, guten Tag, and